So be working on tying again. Again, we did this a little bit before. I'm just kind of building up from where we were last time, and he's still at the point where we're getting him used to having the rope come over the panel. This looks much better. Like he actually wanted to kind of put his nose on the rope as it was going over, and he didn't. He looked more interested than anything. He wasn't moving his head away, even though I tossed it over. That looks perfect. Same thing when I pull it back. We did a lot of work on that and just pairing that like swing of the rope with food, pairing the rope on the fence with food. Now we'll kind of pair that a little bit longer, have him stay it a little bit longer, and I'm getting him used to that toss too, and that used to really scare him. So this is looking really good, and that was perfect. He was like trying to touch it as it was going away, and he didn't seem fearful of that at all. So perfect. And like Castor didn't need to do this. Castor didn't have the fear of ropes that Atlas has, so Atlas took a lot more time because I had to break down all these things for him. Where literally with Castor, I think I tied him after 2 sessions. He didn't care. He was like, "Yeah, I can stand here perfect," and was like, "Whatever." So he was easy, but Atlas has definitely made me change and learn stuff because it was so much more difficult for him because he is so much more fearful. So we're doing the same thing on the left side. So I want to do it with both eyes so he can see it and make sure that's he's cool with it. Again, I'm not going to push it right in front of his face. I don't want to hit him in the face with it. If I hit him on accident, I'm going to pretend like I was going to do it on purpose and I'm just going to click and reinforce him. Like, it's not a big deal. I'm just going to try to not do it again in the future. But sometimes that happens. Um, but I'm trying to just get all the rope up here. I want him to target it for a little bit. This is kind of his first part of tying. It doesn't necessarily look like it, but I want him to just target it. It's very similar to like the leading. I want him to want to stand at the panel and target the rope. Targeting the rope is going to be a big part of that. It's going to be just like the handheld target where he follows it and that's like kind of their safety blanket, their security blanket. It's going to be the same thing with this. He's going to, when he's worried, want to touch that rope. Like, same thing with the leading. He wants to touch that rope. So that's kind of what I'm working on here. And I love that he's trying to touch it and investigate it. He doesn't have to move his head around. Like, he picked his head up there, but he doesn't need to do that. He just keeps his head the same level. Like, I like that he's trying to like move it with his face. Like, that's also kind of rare for him. He's usually not super curious. Um, but I really like that where he's investigating it, moving it around. But he could just touch it normally too. That's totally fine. So I'm just pairing this with a lot of food. And before he was just working on just a shorter lead rope, just laid over once. This is a little bit different. It's laid over multiple times. But I want to kind of get him generalizing a little bit that whatever rope-like thing is on the fence, I want him to target and station by. So like we're on a different panel. I want to move it a little bit. It's folded over once, it's folded over many times, that kind of thing, since he's pretty solid with just touching it in general. So that's what we're kind of working on. And I'm still feeding him pretty frequently. Soon we'll start building up duration, so I'll wait a little bit longer between them, between feedings, and then I'll start walking away from him as well. Um, and seeing if he can stand there next to the rope. But just pairing the rope with food, especially the movement of the rope. And I do prefer like here where he's touching it and he's creating the movement of the rope. That's perfect. Um, that's what I'd rather him do. Like obviously I'm gonna have to do it when I toss it over and stuff, but I do like that he's interested enough to make it move and he's also not afraid of it when it does move. So that's really cool. But yeah, this is gonna be kind of boring because it's just me feeding him while the rope moves. But yeah, when it comes over the rope or over the rail and off the rail, I feed him every time. Because my main goal here is to get him used to the movement of the rope. That's what I'm looking for specifically. So you can see that he's kind of raises his head up a little bit still when it comes over, but it's definitely an improvement. He doesn't really have any reaction when I pull the rope away from him, so that is good. So again, a little bit of a head raise, but not bad. I mean, before it was turn and run away. So this is much, much better. And this is how we had this set up before um, with the other rope. And he's really used to this, but I wanted to make sure he was cool with it folded over too. So there might be different ways of tying and stuff. Like I am never planning on hard tying him. He'll always just be wrapped around something or with a blocker. Um, because I just don't like to hard tie anybody. I don't really think that it's necessary. So um, but this is what we're building up to. This is the beginning of it. So now I'm going to take a step back and then click and come back. So now we're starting to build up a little bit of a distance and duration. If we can stay there, I take a step back, I click while I'm back, and then I come back and feed him. So that looks really, really good. Can reinforce him for being calm while I take the rope off. That looked really cool. So I'm really happy with that. I'm going to give him a little bit of jack pad on the ground, and I'm going to get his hay net set up. So he's also worried about the hay net. He had a bad experience with it, and it was something I didn't even think about. Like, he went to eat out of the hay net, he got the net part in his mouth, went to run away, and when horses are afraid, their mouths will seal, and so it didn't drop right out of his mouth. So it felt to him like it was chasing him because it was still in his mouth. He turned to run, and it was still there, so it felt like it was chasing him. Eventually, like, he went a stride or two, and then he could open his mouth and it fell out, but that scared him enough. So, and I really should have planned a bit more for that reaction again and probably held on to this one a little bit more or um, had him like eat hay on top of this one. I also have like a hay bag, which I should have used. That would have been a much better place to start than just working on the net because I can go back and make it much easier for him. Because the hay net will just has a hole in the middle, or the hay bag has just a hole in the middle, so he can just pull the hay out and get used to eating out of a bag and get used to putting his head in a bag and then get used to eating out of it while the bag moves. And then I also have another hay bag with a hay net in front, like in front of the hole, and then graduate to that and then graduate to this actual net. So I just did too many steps at once here, but right now all I'm asking him to do is target the net, which he's okay with doing. And then what I do next is I pull out a little bit of hay through the little holes in the net, and then I want him to kind of pull out those so that his mouth is not close to the net itself. But I just wanted to talk about this little clip a little bit because I've never taught a horse to eat out of a hay net. I mean, everybody else knows how to do it. Castor knows how to do it, even though he's also a Mustang. It was just one of those things you don't think about. But now, like going back and watching it, I'm like, oh, I should have made this much, much easier because now I kind of, played with it here or there because I was like, oh, it's not a big deal if he doesn't get out of hay net. But now I'm like, yeah, I really would like him to. And I didn't go back and fix it at the time. This video is from 2 years ago, so I should have fixed it at this time because now I'm still working on the hay bag. Like he can eat out of a hay bag, but he's still kind of a little iffy on it. So just being prepared. I'm sure this is probably going to be for not the majority of people, but it's just a good training lesson. But yeah, I'll break it down into huge pieces. And especially with like the hay bag or hay net or whatever you're using, like there's a little like loop on the bottom of the hay bag. Use that. I made that mistake as well is I left him for a second while I went to grab something and he wanted to eat out of the hay net. And then it moved more because I wasn't there to hold it, and that scared him more. So if I would have used that loop and just like tied it to the panel, it wouldn't have scared him as much. So little things like that are just important to think about. So we had a little hay net break and kind of some talk about that training, and now we're going to go back to the rope and finish up with that. So same kind of thing. I'm all still going to work on me backing away. So now I'm going to take like 2 steps away and then come back. I'm just going to keep the camera on him because I'm just backing a step or 2 away and then clicking and reinforcing. So the goal from this is I really want him to stay targeting at the rope for longer and longer periods of time, and he can stay there while I leave. And then I eventually can go in the barn. And then I can eventually do a chore. And I can go do whatever and move horses around while he stays here. And then I'll build in the other things, the other parts of time. So wearing the halter, eating out of the hay net, then actually clipping the halter to the lead rope and actually like wrapping the rope around the panel and then actually attaching it to the blocker tie ring. All these little pieces will come, but this is kind of where we're starting. For a couple steps after the start. So, but I'm just gonna kind of fast forward through this part because it's just me taking a few steps back, clicking, and coming back. So I'll take like a step back a few times, then 2 steps back a few times, then 3 steps back a few times, and just continue doing that process. And then like just a second ago, I'm also kind of just reinforcing for him really touching it. I do need to be careful with that though because I don't want to make a horse that's like biting the rope and flinging it around. I want interest in it, specifically with Atlas. Like I like that he's moving it around because he's a different horse than Castor. If I did this for Castor, he'd be biting the rope and pulling it out and doing all kinds of things. Castor doesn't really need that. But you could create that horse if you do too much of this. So I like that he's interested in it and he's investigating it, but my goal isn't to get Atlas to move the rope around or bite the rope or move his head around all the time. I just want him to stand here and station at it. So that's another thing as well, is don't do too much of this. I'm doing probably a little bit too much of this. So I think right now he's thinking that I want him to hit it with his nose, so he keeps kind of moving his head around because I was reinforcing that a lot. So then he goes a long time without reinforcement, so I got to be careful with that. So now he's kind of moving his head away. Now he's like, look over here. Now I'm like waiting a really long time, especially if he was like a really bored horse or really fearful horse, he could leave in these moments. So I want to be careful because then there he kind of has straightened his head and I think touched the rope. So I want to be careful I don't leave too many moments in there. I want to set it up to where he could be reinforced pretty quickly and pretty regularly so I can keep him on the right track.